Have you ever wondered what really makes a woman feel safe, seen and deeply connected, not just tonight, but for a lifetime? I used to think it was about success in our relationship with our partners. Looks. Saying the right thing at the right time. But the older I get, the more I see the truth. What she truly craves is a man who's present, a man who listens with his eyes, who doesn't just touch her skin, but understands her silence. Here's the part most men never learn. Attraction fades the moment attention disappears. In this video, I'll share the two things every woman quietly longs for in a relationship, the things most men overlook, until it's too late. If you're ready to become the kind of man she still thinks about when she closes her eyes, not because you tried harder, but because you finally understood what mattered, stick around. And if this resonates, hit subscribe. This might just change the way you love forever. I want to tell you about David. He's 58, married for nearly 3 decades. He didn't come to me angry or desperate, just tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep, but the kind that comes from too much silence between two people. I don't even know when it happened, he said, but somewhere along the way, my wife and I stopped being us. No fights, no betrayal. Just a quiet, steady distance, the kind that doesn't announce itself but settles in like dust. We still eat dinner together. We sleep in the same bed. We talk about the kids, the bills, the groceries. But somehow, he said, we stopped talking about us. He wasn't trying to leave. He wasn't angry, but he was scared. Scared that he'd already lost her. And neither of them had said a word. So I sent him to someone, Mr. Lee. He's 78, widowed. His wife passed a decade ago, but he still tends her garden like she might come home tomorrow. They were married 45 years. And when Mr. Lee speaks about love, he doesn't raise his voice. But every word lands heavy, like truth wrapped in memory. David met him on a quiet morning. No big conversation, just 2 men, a pot of tea, and time. And after hearing David out, Mr. Lee asked one question. Do you still give your wife your time? David blinked. Of course, we live together. Mr. Lee smiled gently. I didn't ask if you share a house. I asked if you still give her your time, the kind that says, I see you. David didn't have an answer, but something in him cracked open, and maybe that's when the healing quietly began. After hearing David's story and watching how Mr. Lee's quiet words seemed to cut through years of silence, I couldn't stop thinking. A lot of men after 50 start to believe romance is something we've outgrown. We tell ourselves, we're too old for that now. She knows I love her, that should be enough. But it isn't, because here's what most of us forget. Just because time passes doesn't mean the need to feel loved fades. And for the women in our lives, that need doesn't just remain, it deepens. Women over 40 don't stop wanting to be seen, to be chosen, to be understood. They just get quieter about it, not because they stop feeling, but because too many. And times no one noticed when they did. You see, there's a difference between peace and emotional distance, between comfort and being forgotten. David realized that, not through a big event, but in a small, quiet shift. He didn't fly her to Paris. He didn't write sonnets. He just started showing up differently. He came home and put the phone down, without being asked. He sat beside her, not out of habit, but out of care. He stopped listening to respond and started listening to understand. He noticed how she stirred her tea, how she curled her leg when she relaxed, how her voice softened when she was tired, and he waited, not to fix, but to hear. And slowly, she softened too. It wasn't a light switch, he told me, but I started seeing her again. And somehow, she started seeing me too, and I understood that more than I expected to. Because I've been with my wife for years too, and if there's one thing marriage has taught me, it's this. It's not the big days that hold love together, it's the ordinary ones. It's the coffee she likes, made right, without being asked. It's noticing when she's gone quiet and choosing to lean in, even when she says, I'm fine. It's the way you choose to love, not loudly but consistently, not to impress but to remind her she still matters. Maybe love after 50 isn't about sparks or surprises. Maybe it's just this, sitting down beside the woman you've been with for decades and saying, without needing words, "I still choose you." A few days after that talk with Mr. Lee, David decided to try something different, nothing dramatic. No candlelit dinner, no big speech, just one quiet evening at home. He put his phone on silent, left the emails unread, and for the first time in a long while, he sat next to his wife, not out of habit, but with intention. They weren't talking much, until she brought up an old movie, the one they used to love watching together, the one they quoted lines from during long car rides. She said, "Remember that scene where he drops everything just to be with her?" David smiled. He remembered, but more importantly, he remembered them. That night, he didn't just hear her. He saw her. He watched the way her eyes lit up when she talked about that movie. He noticed how she shifted in her seat, how she tucked one leg under the other, just like she always had. He followed the rise and fall of her breath. The little sigh she let out when the room finally felt comfortable, and in that stillness he realized how much of her he'd been missing, even while living under the same roof. Not because he didn't care, but because he'd forgotten how to be there. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. There's a study, and maybe you've heard of it, that says if two people in love look into each other's eyes for 3 uninterrupted minutes, their heartbeats will start to sync. David didn't need a study to know that something shifted, that something in him began to soften, to reconnect, and when he looked over and saw his wife quietly smiling, not at him, but with him, he knew you don't have to travel far to find your way back to someone. Sometimes you just need to come close enough to truly see them again. Presence isn't flashy, but it's everything. "I shared with you men, David once told me something that made me pause. I thought we were fine," he said. "We weren't fighting. We weren't unhappy. We were stable." But what he called stable was actually disconnected, predictable, routine, quiet. But not in a peaceful way. He had mistaken silence for harmony, but silence in a marriage isn't always gentleness. Sometimes it's retreat. Sometimes when a woman stops speaking up, it's not because she has nothing to say. It's because she's tired of not being heard. David had fallen into a trap so many of us fall into after years of being together. He thought familiarity meant he no longer needed to try, that showing up was enough, that because they shared a house, a schedule, a life, he didn't need to ask questions anymore, or surprise her, or reach for her hand without a reason. But routine, when it's no longer intentional, becomes emotional distance in disguise. And without realizing it, he left her alone, not in the house, but in the relationship. She wasn't asking for more. Things she was asking quietly to still matter. And that's the danger of time. It doesn't always deepen love. Sometimes it just makes us lazy. It's not the absence of love that ends long marriages. It's the slow erosion of effort, the assumption that just because she's still here. After David started showing up with more presence, something else shifted too. He didn't wait for grand occasions anymore. He started doing the little things, the ones that don't cost anything, but mean everything. He began waking up a few minutes earlier just to make her a cup of tea, the way she liked it. Not too hot, just the right amount of honey. He'd ask gently, "How are you feeling today?" And this time, he waited for the real answer. Sometimes he'd walk up behind her in the kitchen and wrap his arms around her, not to fix anything, not to prove a point, just to say, "I'm here." They weren't big gestures, no one was watching, but he was showing up, and that's what mattered, because effort isn't about being loud, it's about being consistent. It's not measured in what you buy, but in how you make someone feel, especially on the days they don't say a word. There's a truth in psychology. Real love makes you want to adjust, not to lose yourself, but to stay close. When someone matters, you listen differently. You move with intention. You show up again. Even when it's not easy, David told me. I used to think love was what we shared in the past, the history, the years, the comfort. But I realize now, love is what you still choose to give. Today, quietly, repeatedly. You don't hold a marriage together with old memories. You hold it with motion, with small acts of presence, done with care, and you do it not to impress, but to protect. What still matters, and you know the result, right? The smiles came back, the tension eased, the silence softened, not overnight, not perfectly, but enough for David to say, I don't think I fixed anything. I think I just remembered how to love again. Sometimes it's that simple. You know, love in our 20s was all about the rush, the butterflies, the chase, the drama, the fire. But love after 50, it speaks a different language. At this age, love is less about how fast your heart beats, and more about how willing you are to keep showing up, even when it doesn't. David started to understand this. There were days when he didn't feel it, when work was stressful, the house was quiet, or their conversations felt dry, but instead of pulling away, he stayed in the room. He kept making tea. He kept asking how she felt. He kept choosing her, even when it would have been easier to disappear into distractions. That's the thing most people don't talk about. Real love doesn't live in constant emotion. It lives in decision, in repetition, in small, quiet choices that no one claps for. David told me one afternoon, I used to think something was wrong with us because I didn't always feel excited, but now I know. The most sacred part of love is choosing someone when you're tired, bored, or uncertain, and still choosing them anyway. He wasn't chasing sparks anymore. He was tending to a steady flame, one that didn't thrill him like it used to, but warmed his whole life just the same. And that kind of peace, you don't find it by accident. You protect it. You water it. You choose it. So how do you keep a deep relationship with a woman you've been with for years? You keep learning her, even when you think you already know everything. You notice her moods before she speaks. You make space for her voice, especially when she's quiet. You touch her in ways that say, you're safe here, and you show her, through consistency, not performance, that you're still all in. Because at this age, love isn't about chasing something new. It's about preserving something true. One evening, David shared something with me that hit deeper than I expected. He said it wasn't the apology that changed her. It was the consistency, not the flowers, not the I'm sorry, but the quiet, steady effort he made, day after day, to really show up again. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't trying to win her back. He just showed her gently but clearly, you still matter to me. I still choose you. And something in her began to shift. She started smiling more, laughing at his old jokes again, answering his questions with more than just fine. One night, for no reason at all, she walked over to him and wrapped her arms around him. That's when he knew. She wasn't just reacting. She was remembering how it felt to be seen, to be wanted, to be chosen. Then she looked at him and said something that stayed with him and with me. It's been a long time since I felt like you picked me. David said he had to excuse himself and walk outside, not because he was upset, but because he realized how long she'd been waiting for that feeling, how quietly she'd been aching for it, and how close he came to losing her, simply by forgetting to remind her that she was still the one. Here's the truth. No matter how long you've been together, a woman never stops needing to feel chosen. Not just when she's dressed up, not just on anniversaries, but when she's in pajamas, tired, worn down by life, when she knows, deep in her bones, that if you had to choose again today, you'd still pick her. And when she feels that, she won't want to be anywhere else but beside you. Mr. Lee once told me something I've never forgotten. We were sitting on his porch as the sun dipped low. He held his cup of tea, quiet as always. And then he said, "Women don't leave because they stop loving. They leave because they stop feeling seen." At the time, I didn't fully grasp it. But watching David's story unfold, I finally did. He didn't win his wife back with grand gestures. There were no speeches, no flowers on the doorstep. What changed things was something quieter and harder. He stayed. He stopped assuming she already knew how he felt. He started showing her again, through presence, through small, steady actions. No big plans, no confessions, just one simple truth. You still matter. And she noticed, at first, in the way her shoulders relaxed when he walked into the room. Then, the way she looked him in the eye a little longer, laughed a little easier. One evening, she wrapped her arms around him, gently, intentionally, and said, "It's been a long time since I felt like you picked me. Not you love me, not you're still here, but you choose me." That's what most men don't realize until it's too late. Love doesn't fall apart from conflict. It fades from neglect. And women, they don't always leave with slammed doors or packed bags. Sometimes they leave quietly, emotionally, because no one noticed they were disappearing. So I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not handing out advice. I'm just sharing this story so you can ask yourself, am I still showing up? Not just with my body, but with my presence, with attention, with effort that doesn't wait for a reason, because there are only two things a woman truly needs in love. Not promises, not perfection, just two things: time and effort. Time that isn't rushed, that says, "I'm listening even when you're quiet." Effort that isn't transactional, that says you're still worth trying for. You don't need to be poetic. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be real and willing. And if it's been a while since she felt chosen, don't wait for the right moment. Be the moment. She may never ask, but trust me, she will always know.